Going to follow an inspiring story that will help you practice English reading, listening, and speaking. If you do not understand something, you can always rewind the video a little and repeat the words. You can also practice speaking out loud. This story is simple, easy to understand, and full of life lessons that can help you grow. Our story is about a girl who faces a lot of pain in her life. She feels sad, alone, and invisible. Many people experience these feelings. Life can sometimes feel unfair, and it can be hard to stay strong. But this story will show you something amazing. Pain can teach you important lessons. It can help you become stronger, braver, and wiser. At the beginning, the girl feels broken. She thinks she is weak, and she hides her feelings from others. Her mornings are quiet and lonely. Her days feel heavy, and her nights are full of sadness. You will hear how she struggles and how she feels inside. Listening carefully will help you understand the emotions and the simple words used in English. You can pause or repeat sentences to improve your speaking and pronunciation. But her story does not stay sad. Slowly, she learns how to turn her pain into power. She takes small steps, faces her fears, listens to her inner voice, and even begins helping other people. Each step makes her stronger. The story shows that anyone can change, even if life feels very hard. This is a story of hope, courage, and transformation. While you listen, try to follow the story carefully. Repeat the sentences out loud. Practice reading and speaking the words as clearly as possible. You can also try to imagine the scenes in your mind. This will help you remember the English words and improve your listening skills. By the end of this story, you will see how the girl grows from sadness to strength. You will learn important life lessons, and you will also improve your English reading, listening, and speaking. Remember, if something is difficult, rewind the video and try again. This story is not just about English. It is about learning how to face life and grow stronger every day. Section 1. Living in the shadow of pain. Her mornings were always quiet. She opened her eyes when the sun was still low, but the light did not feel warm. It felt cold, like it was only for other people. She lay in bed for a long time, listening to the silence of her room. Sometimes she wanted to sleep again, just to escape her own thoughts. But she could not hide forever. She stood up slowly and moved through her room like a shadow. Every day began the same way. She washed her face, but the water did not wash away the heaviness in her heart. She looked at her reflection in the mirror and saw tired eyes. She tried to smile, but the smile looked empty. She whispered to herself, "I am fine." But she knew it was not true. She was not fine. She was hurting. On her way to school and later to work, she walked through the streets where life was full of noise. People laughed, cars moved quickly, and children shouted in the distance. But all the sounds felt far away. It was as if she was walking inside a glass box, looking out, but never really touching the world. She felt invisible. Even when people looked at her, they did not see her pain. They only saw her face, not her story. In the daytime, she pretended to be okay. She spoke when she had to, she nodded when others talked. But her heart was not in the words. She carried sadness inside her chest like a hidden stone. Every word she said was heavy. Every smile she showed was false. And when people asked, "How are you?" she always gave the same answer, "I'm good." But inside, she was not good. She was breaking quietly. At lunch, she often sat alone. Sometimes she ate quickly so no one would notice her. Sometimes she pushed food around the plate without tasting it. She was not hungry for food, she was hungry for peace. But peace was far away, and pain was always near. She thought, maybe something is wrong with me. Maybe I am too weak for this life. The evenings were the hardest. When she returned home, the silence grew deeper. There were no masks to wear, no people to pretend for. She sat on her bed and let the sadness flow. Tears came without sound. She cried until her pillow was wet. Then she closed her eyes and hoped sleep would take her quickly. Sometimes sleep came, sometimes it did not. And when it did not, she lay in the dark, asking herself questions with no answers. Why do I feel this way? Why can't I be strong like others? Why me? These questions grew louder every night. She thought pain was proof of weakness. She believed her sadness made her less than other people. She compared herself with others who smiled, who laughed, who seemed free. She thought she was different, broken, and invisible. This is the shadow of pain. Pain has a way of making life smaller. It closes doors. It hides colors. It makes the world look gray, even when the sun shines. Pain whispers lies. You are weak. You are alone. You cannot change. And when you believe those lies, you feel trapped inside yourself. But what she did not know was this. Pain also holds a secret. Pain is not only darkness. Inside pain, there is a hidden chance for growth. Like a seed in the ground, covered by dirt, waiting for light. The seed feels pressure, it feels darkness, but inside, it is alive. Her life was the same. Her pain was the dirt, heavy and cold, but hidden under that dirt, something new could grow. Still, in this stage of her journey, she could not see the seed. She could only see the shadow, and in the shadow, she felt small. She made herself even smaller, hoping no one would notice her pain. She thought if she stayed quiet, if she stayed invisible, the world would forget about her sadness. But her heart did not forget. The heaviness followed her everywhere. Sometimes she dreamed about another life. A life where she woke up smiling, where she had energy, where she felt free. But each morning, the dream ended, and the same heaviness returned. The contrast between her dream and her reality was sharp. The dream was light, the reality was shadow, and the shadow always won. Still, the shadow was not the end. Even in her sadness, she started to ask small questions. Why do I feel this way? What can I do? Is there another path? The questions were soft, almost hidden under her tears, but they were there. And questions are important, because questions are the beginning of change. She did not have answers yet. She only had doubts. But doubts are not always bad. Doubts can open doors. Doubts can make us look deeper. Doubts can lead us to a new path. Her story in this moment is a story of survival. She was living, but not truly alive. She was moving, but without joy. She was breathing, but each breath was heavy. This was her shadow life, her life in pain. But inside the shadow, the small light of curiosity began to shine. She did not know it, but the questions in her heart were the first steps toward power. This is the truth of pain. Pain is real, but pain is not the end. Pain makes us smaller only if we let it. Pain can be a cage, but it can also be a door. Pain can crush us, but it can also shape us. At this point, she only saw the cage. She only felt the shadow. But her questions were the key that could unlock a new way. She sat one night, looking at the stars from her window. The sky was wide, the stars were bright, but she felt so small under them. She whispered, "Why me?" The words carried sadness, but also a secret wish. a wish that maybe there was more, a wish that maybe she could change. And that wish, even in her quiet pain, was the beginning of something greater. Section 2. The breaking point. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months. Still, the heaviness did not leave her. She carried it everywhere, like a hidden weight that grew heavier each day. At first, she thought she could manage it. She told herself, "I am fine. I can keep going." But inside, she was not fine. She was slowly breaking, piece by piece, and she did not even see it clearly until one night when everything felt too much. It was late, and the house was quiet. She sat on her bed, looking at the same 4 walls she had seen 1,000 times before. The silence was not peaceful. It was heavy, pressing down on her chest. She tried to distract herself with music, with books, with anything, but nothing helped. The pain inside her heart was louder than any sound around her, and suddenly the tears came, strong, unstoppable, and endless. She cried like she had never cried before. Her whole body shook, her hands covered her face, and she felt as if her chest might break open from the weight of her sadness. The tears were hot, and they burned her skin. She whispered again and again, "I can't do this anymore. I can't." It was not only sadness, it was exhaustion. She was tired of pretending. She was tired of hiding. She was tired of fighting pain alone. This moment was her breaking point. She had carried the weight for too long, and now it felt impossible to hold. The shadow that followed her every day finally caught her, and she could not run anymore. She collapsed under it. In that low place, dangerous thoughts entered her mind. She asked herself if her life even mattered. She wondered if anyone would notice if she disappeared. She felt invisible, forgotten, and worthless. This is what pain does when it is left inside for too long. It grows until it fills every space, leaving no room for hope. She lay on the floor, holding her knees close, rocking back and forth like a small child. She thought, maybe this is who I am forever. Maybe I will always be broken. The idea of a different life felt far away, almost impossible. She was stuck in a cycle. Wake up, pretend, feel pain, sleep, repeat. The cycle felt endless, like a wheel that turned and turned but never moved forward. But here, in the deepest point of her sadness, something changed. Because when you fall so low, you are left with only 2 choices: stay down forever or try to rise. The breaking point is a place of danger, but also a place of decision. She did not know it yet, but this moment was also her chance. She asked herself a question she had never asked before. Do I want to live like this forever? The answer, hidden under her tears, was no. She did not want this to be her whole story. She did not want her life to be only pain. A small, soft voice inside whispered, "There must be more. There must be another way." This is the contrast. She could stay down, trapped in the same cycle of sadness, or she could dare to rise, even if it was slow, even if it was hard. The first choice meant giving up, living only in the shadow. The second choice meant risking change, risking hope. At first, she did not feel ready for hope. Hope felt dangerous, like something too bright for her tired eyes. But the breaking point gave her no comfort. Staying down hurt just as much as standing up. In fact, staying down hurt more. So she thought, if I must hurt, maybe I can hurt in a way that leads to something better. The breaking point did not make her instantly strong. It did not erase her pain, but it gave her clarity. For the first time, she saw that she had a choice. She could not control what had happened to her, but she could control what she did next. And in that realization, a tiny seed of power was planted. That night, after hours of tears, she sat up. Her body was weak, her eyes were swollen, but something inside her was awake. She whispered again, this time with a different tone, I can't do this anymore. But maybe I can try something new. She did not know what that something new was. She had no plan, no clear answer. But she had a beginning, the decision not to let the pain win completely. She would not stay down forever. She would look for a way, any way, to rise. Sometimes in life, we must fall very low before we see clearly. The ground is cold, but it teaches us. The darkness is heavy, but it shows us how much we need light. Without the breaking point, she might have continued her cycle forever, living in quiet pain without change. But the breaking point forced her to face herself. It demanded a decision, and she chose, slowly, to look for another path. The lesson here is simple. Sometimes we must fall low to rise higher. The pain that brings us to our knees can also push us to stand again. The moment we think it is the end can also be the moment we begin. The breaking point is not only destruction, it is also the start of transformation. She did not rise like a hero. She did not smile immediately, but she began to ask new questions. What can I do? Where can I go from here? How can I change? These questions were the first light after a long night. They did not give her all the answers, but they gave her direction. And so, after the breaking point, her journey continued. She was still in pain, but now she was searching. She was still weak, but now she wanted strength. She was still in the shadow, but now she was looking for meaning. This search would lead her to the next stage of her journey. The search for answers, the search for purpose, the search for hope. Section 3. Searching for meaning. After the breaking point, she could not return to the same old cycle. Something inside her had shifted. She still felt heavy, but she also felt restless. She did not want to sit in the darkness forever. She wanted to understand. She wanted to know why life hurt so much, and if there was any reason to continue. Her pain had pushed her into a new stage, the stage of searching. At first, the search was small. One morning, she went to the library near her house. She had not been there for a long time, but something inside told her, maybe I can find something here. She walked through the quiet shelves, touching the books with her fingertips, not sure what to choose. Finally, she picked one book at random. It was about a woman who had lost everything but had built a new life, step by step. She opened the book and began to read. The words were simple but strong. The woman in the story had felt the same kind of pain, alone, broken, ready to give up. But instead of staying down, she had learned from her pain. She had used it as fuel to grow. As she read, tears filled her eyes. For the first time, she realized, I am not the only one. Other people know this pain. Other people have survived. This discovery gave her a new kind of comfort. Before, her suffering had felt empty, without meaning. She thought her pain was only punishment. But reading that story, she began to see that pain could also carry a message. Pain could be a teacher. Pain could show her strength she did not know she had. She did not stop with one book. She returned to the library again and again, looking for stories of people who had suffered and grown. Each book was like a small light in the darkness. She read about a man who failed many times before building a business. She read about a runner who lost a race but trained harder and later won. She read about people who were poor, sick, rejected, but still found a way to live with courage. The more she read, the more she began to believe that her pain was not the end. Maybe it was the beginning of something new. She thought, if they can do it, maybe I can too. Her search did not stop with books. She also began to listen. She found short talks online, people speaking about life, struggle, and hope. Some voices were soft, some were strong, but each voice carried a lesson. One speaker said, "Pain is not here to break you. It is here to shape you." She repeated those words again and again in her mind. Shape me, not break me. Shape me, not break me. She also started to talk to people around her. At first, it was hard. She had always hidden her feelings, pretending to be fine. But slowly, she tried to open her heart just a little. She told one friend, "I feel lost." The friend listened and said, "I have felt the same." That simple answer made her feel less alone. Another time she spoke with an older neighbor who shared a story about losing his job but later starting a new path. These conversations reminded her that every person has pain, but every person also has the chance to rise again. The contrast in her life became clear. Before, her suffering had been empty. She cried, but the tears only made her weaker. She asked questions, but she found no answers. That was empty suffering. But now she was searching. She was reading, listening, and speaking. She was connecting her pain with new knowledge. This was meaningful suffering. The pain was still there, but now it had a purpose. It was teaching her. It was guiding her. She began to keep a small notebook. Every time she read something powerful, or heard a strong sentence, or learned from a conversation, she wrote it down. On one page, she wrote, "Fall 7 times, stand up 8. On another page, she wrote, "Pain can be a bridge to power." Each word she wrote was like a small seed planted in her mind. Slowly, her notebook became a garden of hope. Of course, she still had bad days. There were still nights when she cried herself to sleep. But even on those nights, she had something new. She had voices of hope to remember. She could open her notebook, read the words again, and remind herself that she was not alone. She told herself, "This pain is not empty. It means something. It is shaping me." Her search was not only about books and voices, it was also about herself. She started to ask deeper questions. What do I really want in life? What kind of person do I want to be? What can I learn from this pain? The questions were not easy, but they opened her heart. She began to see that pain had made her more sensitive, more aware of others. She noticed when someone else was sad. She felt compassion more strongly. This was another gift hidden inside her pain. The lesson she discovered was simple but powerful. When you search, you find hope. Hope does not come when you sit in silence and wait. Hope comes when you take a step, when you open a book, when you listen to a voice, when you speak your truth. Hope comes when you connect your pain to meaning. And with every small discovery, her inner strength grew. It was not loud or big. It was soft, quiet, like a small flame in her chest. But that flame gave her warmth. It gave her the courage to keep going. She began to believe that pain was not here to kill her. Pain was here to show her a new path. She thought about the woman in the first book she read, how she built a new life after losing everything. She thought, maybe I can build too. Maybe I can grow too. This was the beginning of her inner power. It started with a search, with a question, with a story. and it would continue as she took her first small steps into change. Because the search for meaning always leads to action. And now, she was ready to act. She was ready to take small steps that could lead to a big change. Section 4. Small steps, big change. Her search for meaning gave her hope, but hope alone was not enough. She knew she needed to act. The thought of changing her whole life felt too big, too heavy. But she remembered the voices she had read and heard. Start small. Do one thing today. So she decided to begin, even if her steps were tiny. The first change was waking up earlier. Before, she would stay in bed long after the sun had risen, staring at the ceiling with no energy. Now, she set an alarm. The first morning, it was difficult. Her body wanted to stay under the blanket, safe and hidden. But she whispered to herself, "Just today, I will try." She stood up, opened her window, and let the morning air touch her face. It was only a few minutes earlier than usual, but it felt like a victory. She thought, if I can do this once, maybe I can do it again. The next step was moving her body. She had never been strong in sports, but she knew her body needed energy. On the second day, she decided to take a short walk. At first, her legs felt heavy, and her mind said, "What is the point?" But she kept going, step after step, until she returned home. Her heart beat faster, and for the first time in a long time, she felt alive. The air was fresh, her body was awake, and her spirit was a little lighter. Then came writing. She bought a small notebook, not for lessons this time, but for her own feelings. Each night before sleep, she wrote down her thoughts. Some pages were full of sadness, some were full of questions, but with every word she felt a little freer. Her pain no longer stayed only inside her. It moved onto the paper. She learned that writing was like opening a window in her heart. After a few weeks, she chose one more step, learning a new skill. It did not have to be big. She picked something simple, cooking a new recipe. She found a short video and followed the steps carefully. The first time, she burned the food. She laughed and felt embarrassed, but instead of giving up, she tried again the next day. Slowly, she got better. The meal was not perfect, but it was hers. That small success gave her pride. Each action was small: wake up, walk, write, cook. But together, they began to shape her days. She realized that change was not about giant leaps. It was about small, repeated steps. Like drops of water filling a glass, her small efforts added up until she could see the difference. The contrast between her old self and her new self grew clearer. The old self stayed in bed, silent, stuck in sadness. The new self stood up even when weak and tried. The old self felt like a shadow, waiting for life to pass. The new self was learning to move, to speak, to grow. Some days she still felt heavy. Some mornings she wanted to give up. But now she had a plan. Just do one thing. Just take one step, and often, one step was enough to start the day. She noticed changes in her heart, too. The morning air felt brighter. The walks gave her energy. The writing gave her peace. The cooking gave her joy. These were not miracles, but they were progress. And progress gave her power. She began to see herself differently. Before, she had thought, I am weak. I cannot change. Now, she thought, I am learning. I am trying. I am growing. The words in her notebook were no longer only sad. They also held sentences like, today I tried, today I stood up, today I am proud. Her small steps were like planting seeds in a garden. At first, the garden looked empty, but with care and patience, little green shoots began to rise. Each small habit was a seed, and together they created something new inside her. She realized that power does not arrive all at once. Power grows slowly, like a seed. One day, while on her walk, she stopped to look at a tree. The tree was tall, strong, and full of leaves. She thought, "This tree began as a tiny seed smaller than my hand. It grew because it did not stop. It grew slowly, but it grew." She smiled and said softly, "I am like this tree. My steps are small, but they will grow into strength." These thoughts gave her courage. For the first time in a long time, she began to believe in her future. She began to imagine what else she could do. If she could wake up earlier, maybe she could also face her fears. If she could walk every day, maybe she could also stand tall in hard situations. If she could learn one small skill, maybe she could learn bigger ones too. Her small steps gave her a foundation. They were like stones placed on the ground, one after another, creating a path. The path was not finished, but it was there, and she was walking on it. The lesson she discovered was simple. Change begins small. You do not need to move mountains in one day. You only need to take one step, then another, and over time, the steps create a new life. She was still afraid of many things. Fear still whispered in her ear. But now, she had something new inside her. Courage. A soft, quiet courage that grew with every small step she took. And soon, this courage would push her to face her fears directly. Section 5. Facing Fear. Her small steps gave her new strength, but deep inside, fear was still there. Fear lived in the shadows of her heart. It whispered in her mind every day. What if you fail? What if people laugh at you? What if your future is empty? For many years, she let fear control her. She stayed quiet. She avoided risk. She hid her true self. But now, with the small changes she had made, she felt ready to try something new. She decided she could no longer run from fear. She had to face it. The first fear was failure. She remembered the times she tried something and it went wrong. The memory of burned food, broken dreams, and silent disappointments made her afraid to try again. If I fail, she thought, I will feel weak again. But then she remembered her notebook. In it, she had written the words, "Today I tried. Today I stood up. Today I am proud." She realized that trying was already a kind of success. Even if she failed, she would not be the same person. She would still be learning. This thought gave her courage to face failure. One day she decided to join a small group at the library. The group was reading stories and sharing their thoughts. She loved reading, but speaking in front of people made her heart shake. As she walked into the room, her hands were cold and her legs felt heavy. She wanted to turn back. The voice of fear was loud. You will say something wrong. They will not listen. They will laugh. But she remembered her promise. Do not run. Face it. When her turn came to speak, her voice trembled. At first, only a few words came out. She wanted to stop, but she took a breath and continued. She said what she felt about the story, even if her words were simple. And something surprising happened. No one laughed. Instead, people nodded and smiled. One woman said, "That is a good point." In that moment, her fear became smaller. It did not disappear completely, but it lost its power. She learned that fear looks bigger in the mind than it is in reality. The next fear was rejection. She had always been afraid that if people knew her real self, they would not accept her. So she kept her distance. She stayed in the background. But now she wanted to try being open. She decided to invite a neighbor for tea. It was a simple act, but for her, it felt huge. As she knocked on the door, her heart raced. What if she says no? What if she thinks I am strange? The fear whispered. But the neighbor smiled and said yes. They sat together, drank tea, and shared small stories. It was not perfect, but it was real. She realized that rejection is not always the answer. Sometimes people say yes. Sometimes they open the door. The biggest fear was the future. She often worried about what would come next. Her mind filled with questions. Will I be happy? Will I succeed? Will I always feel this way? The future was a dark wall she could not see behind. Before, she had run away from these thoughts, hiding in bed, hoping tomorrow would never come. But now, she stood in front of the wall and said, I do not need to see the whole future. I only need to see the next step. She remembered her walks, her writing, her small habits. Each one was a step into the future. By focusing on today, she was already shaping tomorrow. She began to practice a new way of thinking. Whenever fear spoke, she asked herself, what is the worst that can happen? And what is the best that can happen? When she thought about the worst, it was often not as bad as she imagined. And when she thought about the best, it gave her hope. This simple question turned her fear into a choice. She could choose courage instead of running. The contrast in her life became clear. Before, she ran from fear. She avoided speaking, avoided people, avoided the future. Her world grew smaller and smaller, but now she was meeting fear with courage. She was speaking in public, opening doors, and taking steps into the unknown. Her world was slowly growing bigger. She learned an important lesson. Fear is like a shadow. When you run from it, it chases you and grows larger. But when you face it, the shadow shrinks. Fear is always smaller when you look at it directly. Each time she faced a fear, she felt stronger. After speaking at the library, she felt proud. After sharing tea with her neighbor, she felt connected. After choosing to take steps into the future, she felt hopeful. These moments became her new memories, replacing the old ones of hiding and silence. She began to tell herself a new story. Not, I am weak. I cannot face fear, but I am brave. I can face fear step by step, and with each new story, her heart grew stronger. Still, fear did not disappear. It was always there, whispering. But now she had courage. And courage did not mean the fear was gone. It meant she acted even while afraid. One evening, as she wrote in her notebook, she reflected on her journey. She wrote, Fear tried to stop me today. But I walked into the library. I spoke. I was heard. Fear said people would reject me, but I knocked on the door. I shared tea. Fear said the future is too dark, but I chose one step. I chose courage. She closed her notebook with a smile. She realized something powerful. She was stronger than she thought. Fear had been her enemy for years, but now it was her teacher. It showed her how brave she could be. And this bravery would soon open the door to even bigger change. Section 6. Finding Inner Voice. For a long time, her world was filled with outside voices. Voices of people telling her she was not enough. Voices of memories that repeated her failures. Voices of fear whispering that she would never change. These voices were loud, and she believed them. They told her a story of weakness, and she lived inside that story. But after facing her fears, something new began to rise inside her. It was quiet at first, softer than a whisper. It was her own inner voice, and it said, "You can do this." At the beginning, she almost ignored it. She thought, "This is not real. I am not strong, but the voice returned. Each time she tried something new, the voice spoke again. When she woke early, it said, "See? You did it." When she walked outside, it said, "Step by step, you are moving forward." When she spoke in the library, it said, "Your words matter." Slowly, she realized the truth. This voice was hers, and she could choose to listen to it. The contrast was clear. Before, her self-talk was negative. She told herself, "I am weak. I will fail. No one cares." These words made her smaller. They locked her in fear. But now, she was learning to change the story. She began telling herself, "I am learning. I am growing. I can try again." These words did not remove her problems, but they gave her courage to face them. One morning, as she wrote in her notebook, she decided to try something new. She wrote down the negative thoughts she usually had. On one side of the page, she wrote, "I am not good enough. I will always be alone. I cannot change." Then, on the other side, she wrote the opposite. "I am enough. I can connect. I am changing every day." At first, the new words felt strange. She almost laughed because they did not feel true. But she kept writing them. She whispered them out loud. Slowly, the words began to feel lighter, more possible. Her inner voice grew stronger with practice. Each time she faced fear, she gave her inner voice more power. Each time she chose courage, the voice inside her said, "Yes, you can." She discovered that the voice she listened to most would shape her life. If she listened to fear, she became smaller. If she listened to courage, she became stronger. One day she faced a new test. She was asked to share her thoughts at the library again, but this time in front of more people. Her old thoughts returned. What if I make a mistake? What if my English is not good enough? What if people do not care? For a moment, she almost decided to stay silent, but then she closed her eyes and listened. Deep inside, her inner voice spoke. "You can do this. You have spoken before. You have something to share." She stood up, her hands shaking. Her voice at first was soft, but then it grew. She shared her thoughts about the story they read. People listened, and when she finished, they clapped. In that moment, she felt her inner voice become louder than fear. She realized that her power was not outside, it was inside her all along. The lesson became clear. Power starts inside. Other people can help. Books and teachers can guide. But the strongest voice is the one you choose to believe inside your own heart. When that voice says, "I can," doors open. When it says, "I cannot," doors close. She began to use her inner voice in small daily moments. When she burned her food again, instead of saying, "I am useless," she said, "I am learning. Next time will be better." When she felt lonely, instead of saying, "No one cares about me," she said, "I can reach out." I can invite someone when she felt afraid of tomorrow, instead of saying, "The future is dark," she said, "The future is a journey. I will walk it step by step." This change gave her freedom. She was no longer trapped by old stories. She was writing new ones. Her inner voice became a friend, a mentor, a guide. It reminded her that even small victories mattered. It reminded her that she had survived pain and could turn it into power. Sometimes, the negative voice still returned. It whispered at night when she was tired. It appeared when things went wrong. But now, she had another voice to answer it. When the negative voice said, "You will fail," her inner voice replied, "I will try." When it said, "You are weak," she answered, "I am growing." When it said, "Stop," she said, "Keep going." Her transformation was not loud or dramatic. It was quiet, steady, like a flame that grows stronger each day. She began to see herself in a new light. Not as a broken girl hiding in pain, but as a strong young woman learning to rise. One evening, she sat by the window, writing in her notebook. She wrote, "The most important voice is the one inside. I cannot control what others say. I cannot control what the world gives me, but I can control what I tell myself, and I choose to say, I can. I will. I am enough." She closed the notebook with a smile. For the first time, she felt a deep peace. Her power was not something she had to find outside. It was something she carried inside her heart. And with this new voice guiding her, she was ready to discover a new kind of strength, one that could push her further than she ever thought possible. Section 7. Helping others. As she grew stronger, she began to notice something new around her. She saw the pain in other people's eyes, the quiet struggles that mirrored her own past. On the bus, she saw a boy sitting alone, looking sad. In the park, she noticed an old woman feeding birds and whispering to herself as if no one could hear. At first, she only watched, but slowly, she felt a connection. She remembered how lonely she had been and realized that maybe she could reach out, even in a small way. Her first step was simple. She smiled at the boy on the bus. It was a small gesture, but she saw a faint smile return. The old woman noticed her nod and gave a gentle wave. These small acts showed her that even quiet kindness could make a difference. She began to think, if a small smile can help, maybe my words can help too. She decided to share her story. At the library group, she spoke not only about the books, but also about her own journey. She told them about her mornings of sadness, her breaking point, her fears, and how she learned to face them. She spoke slowly, in simple words, because she wanted everyone to understand. At first, some people listened quietly. Then a few nodded. Some whispered, "I feel the same." She realized that sharing her pain did not make her weak. It made her connect with others. This connection was different from anything she had known. Before, her pain had been like a wall, separating her from the world. Now, her pain became a bridge. She saw that others could learn from her experience just as she had learned from others. The loneliness that had once crushed her was replaced by a sense of purpose. She understood that her suffering could be meaningful if it helped someone else. She started small projects. She helped a young student with English homework, patiently explaining words she had once struggled to understand. She offered encouragement to a colleague at work, reminding them that mistakes were part of learning. She listened to friends when they felt sad, sharing advice from her own journey. Each time she helped, she felt a warm energy inside. It was as if her own pain was transforming into light, not just for herself, but for others too. One day, a friend from her library group came to her with tears in her eyes. She said, "I feel lost. I do not know what to do with my life." The girl remembered her own breaking point, the nights she cried alone. She sat beside her friend and said gently, "I understand. I have felt the same, but I found small steps, one at a time. You can do the same. I will help you." The friend smiled, wiped her tears, and tried a small step. Watching this, she realized that her words had power. Her own scars, once heavy and painful, were now guiding lights for someone else. She also noticed a change in herself. When she helped others, her heart felt lighter. Her sadness did not disappear completely, but it became easier to carry. The act of helping transformed her pain into purpose. She thought, pain does not have to isolate me. It can connect me. It can help me and help others. The contrast in her life became clearer. Before, pain had kept her alone. She had hidden in shadows, afraid to share, afraid to be seen. Now, her pain was a bridge. It connected her to others. It made her stronger and more compassionate. Her scars were no longer a secret to hide. They were a source of light, guiding people who were struggling. She started to organize small gatherings. In these groups, people shared their struggles, their fears, and their hopes. She listened carefully, encouraging everyone to speak. She shared stories from her notebook and reminded them of the small steps she had taken. People began to leave these meetings with smiles, with small plans, with hope. And each time someone found hope, she felt her own heart grow. Her journey of healing had become a journey of helping. Her life began to change in other ways too. She made more friends, people who understood her and supported her. She felt more confident in public, more willing to speak, more willing to try new things. Helping others had given her a new kind of power, a power that was not just for herself, but for the world around her. She understood an important lesson. When you help others, your scars become light for someone else. Pain that once crushed you can now guide, inspire, and heal. The suffering that isolated you can become a bridge that connects hearts. This lesson gave her purpose beyond her own life. She realized that she could continue to grow while lifting others along the way. Even small acts made a difference. A kind word, a patient explanation, a smile, each one added up. She felt joy not because her pain had vanished, but because she had found a way to transform it. The heaviness of her past now had meaning. The nights she cried alone were not wasted. They gave her empathy, understanding, and strength to help others. Her confidence grew steadily. She realized that power is not only about achieving something for yourself. True power comes when you use your experience to make life better for others. She remembered the lessons she had learned in the library, the walks, the small steps, and the courage to face fear. All of these steps had prepared her to reach out, to guide, and to inspire. One evening, she looked out her window and thought about how far she had come. She remembered the girl who hid in bed, lost and invisible. She smiled softly and whispered to herself, "I am still the same girl, but now I can shine. My pain is not gone, but it has a new meaning. I can help. I can connect. I can make a difference." Her journey had reached a new stage. She was no longer only surviving. She was thriving. She was no longer alone. She was part of a larger world, a world where sharing and helping brought light to both her life and the lives of others. This new power, born from helping, was changing her life path. She felt ready to take on bigger challenges, to face more fears, and to grow even more. She realized that her journey was not just about overcoming pain, it was about using that pain to create a life full of meaning and connection. And so, with her inner voice strong, her fears faced, and her heart reaching out to others, she prepared for the next stage of her journey. A stage where her growing strength would meet new opportunities, challenges, and possibilities. Section 8. Transformation. She looked at herself in the mirror one morning and barely recognized the girl who had stared back months ago. The face was the same, but the eyes were different. They carried a quiet strength, a calm confidence, and a warmth that had been missing before. She touched her cheeks, smiling at the reflection, and realized that something deep inside had changed. She was no longer the broken girl who hid in shadows. She had transformed. The transformation had not happened overnight. It was the result of small steps, facing fears, listening to her inner voice, and helping others. Each action had shaped her slowly, like a sculptor shaping clay. Now she felt the power that had been growing inside her, and it showed in everything she did. Her posture was taller, her voice was steady, her heart was open. She could feel the difference in the way she walked, in the way she spoke to people, and even in the way she smiled. She remembered the mornings she used to dread, when getting out of bed felt impossible. Now, mornings were moments of opportunity. She woke early, greeted the day, and felt energy she had never known before. She thought about the walks she had taken, the words she had written, the skills she had learned. Every small step had built this new life. What once seemed impossible had become natural. Her confidence extended beyond her own life. She spoke to groups, helped friends, and shared her story with courage. Before, she had hidden in silence, fearing judgment. Now she spoke with a calm authority that drew people in. Her words inspired others because they were real. They came from experience, from struggle, from the lessons learned in her journey. The contrast with her past self was clear. The broken girl had been small, afraid, and quiet. She had lived in shadows, thinking her pain was a burden too heavy to bear. She had believed she was weak, that the world was too big, and that her life had little meaning. But now, she was strong, brave, and present. She carried her past not as a weight, but as proof of her resilience. Her pain had shaped her, but it no longer defined her. Even her emotions had changed. Where sadness once dominated, she now felt a balance. She could still feel hurt, frustration, and disappointment, but they no longer controlled her. She acknowledged them, learned from them, and moved forward. Happiness, hope, and courage had replaced the emptiness that had once filled her days. Her heart, once fragile, had grown open and resilient. She remembered the breaking point, the nights she cried alone, the fear that had kept her trapped, and she realized that each of those moments had been essential. Without the pain, she would not have learned the lessons of courage, patience, and inner strength. Without struggle, she would not have known the power of small steps or the joy of helping others. Her transformation was built on every tear, every fear faced, and every moment of effort. Her friends noticed the change, too. People who had only seen her as quiet and timid before now saw someone dependable, kind, and strong. They looked to her for guidance, for advice, and for inspiration. She realized that transformation is not just personal, it affects the people around you. Her life was no longer isolated in sorrow. It connected with others in positive ways. The contrast was everywhere. Before, she avoided challenges. Now she met them with determination. Before, she doubted herself constantly. Now, she trusted her inner voice. Before, her pain had been empty and isolating. Now, it had become meaningful and shared. Before, she had hidden. Now, she shone. She reflected on the person she had been. The broken girl was not forgotten, but she was no longer who she was. She felt gratitude for the journey, even for the hardest moments. They had led her to this transformation. She understood that pain is not the end. Pain is a beginning, a teacher, and a guide. When faced, it can lead to growth, strength, and purpose. Her transformation was visible not only in actions, but in spirit. She approached life with curiosity, courage, and care. She laughed more freely, spoke more confidently, and acted more intentionally. Every decision carried awareness. She had learned to choose her thoughts, her words, and her steps carefully. Her inner voice guided her, her small steps empowered her, and her connections with others enriched her life. She knew that transformation is a continuous process. She was not perfect, and she still faced challenges. But the difference now was that she had the tools to overcome them. She had learned that strength grows through effort, courage grows through facing fear, and hope grows through searching for meaning. She had learned that her past did not limit her, it prepared her. Standing by the window, she looked at the city outside. She saw people hurrying, some smiling, some sad. She understood that everyone has struggles, but not everyone chooses to transform them. She felt proud of herself for choosing growth, for listening to her inner voice, for helping others, and for taking the small steps that had changed her life. The lesson of transformation was clear. Strength is born from struggle. Power grows from courage. Life's hardest moments can become the foundation for growth. She was living proof that pain does not destroy, it shapes. The broken girl had become a strong, confident woman, ready to continue her journey, ready to face the future with hope and determination. And now, as she reflected on her journey, she prepared to share what she had learned, to inspire others, and to carry her transformation into the next chapters of life. Her story was no longer just about survival, it was about living fully, with courage, power, and purpose. Section 9. Lessons from her journey. As she sat quietly in her room, looking out at the evening sky, she began to think about everything she had been through. The pain, the fear, the loneliness, the tears. They were all part of her story. But now, after months of small steps, facing fears, and helping others, she could see the lessons clearly. She realized that her journey was not only about her life, it was about understanding how pain can teach, transform, and create power. The first lesson she remembered was simple but powerful. Pain is real, but it can teach. She remembered the nights when her heart ached and her mind repeated the words, "I cannot do this." At the time, the pain felt heavy, endless, and unfair. But looking back, she understood that pain was also a teacher. It forced her to stop, to think, and to search for meaning. Pain had shown her what was important. It had taught her empathy, courage, and patience. She realized that everyone experiences hardship, but it is how we respond that shapes our lives. Pain alone does not define us. Our actions in response to it do. The second lesson was about small steps. She smiled as she thought about her first efforts, waking up earlier, taking short walks, writing in her notebook, learning small skills. At first, each step seemed too small to matter, but over time, the steps added up. Her days changed, her confidence grew, and her life began to transform. She remembered the saying she had written in her notebook, "Drops of water fill the glass." Each small action might seem insignificant alone, but together, they create something powerful. Growth is not instant. It is built slowly, with patience and persistence. The third lesson came from facing fear. She remembered how her heart had raced the first time she spoke in public, how her hands had trembled as she tried something new. Fear had once controlled her life, keeping her small and silent. But when she faced it, she discovered that fear was not as strong as it seemed. Each time she acted despite fear, it became smaller, and her courage became bigger. She realized that fear is not a wall, it is a signal that something important is ahead. Facing it step by step creates strength that lasts a lifetime. The fourth lesson came from helping others. She had been afraid to share her story, to reach out, and to connect. But when she began helping others, smiling, listening, teaching, or sharing her experience, she felt her own pain transform into power. Her scars, once heavy, became lights for others. She saw how meaningful her suffering could be when it was shared. Helping others gave her life purpose beyond herself. She realized that the greatest power comes not only from overcoming personal pain, but from using it to uplift others. As she reflected, she saw a clear contrast in her journey. She remembered the old version of herself, the girl who wanted to give up, who felt small, who hid from life. That girl had been trapped by fear, pain, and doubt. But the new version of herself had grown. She had faced challenges, taken small steps, built courage, connected with others, and found her inner voice. She understood that giving up keeps the pain inside, heavy and silent. But growing up, facing life, and acting with purpose transforms pain into something meaningful. Anyone listening, she realized, could also take this path. She thought about the people who might hear her story, those who felt lost, weak, or invisible. She wanted them to know that change is possible. Pain does not have to define life. Every small step, every moment of courage, every act of kindness can create a ripple of power. The lessons she had learned were simple but universal. Pain teaches. Small steps build change. Facing fear grows courage, and helping others gives meaning. Anyone willing to take these lessons to heart could turn their own pain into power. She remembered how lonely she had once felt. She had believed she was weak, invisible, and unworthy. But by reflecting on her journey, she realized that those feelings were not truth. They were temporary states, reactions to difficult circumstances. She had the choice to listen to fear and doubt, or to listen to courage and hope. She had chosen courage. She had chosen hope. And now, she could show others that they too could choose. The girl, now a strong young woman, felt a quiet joy in her chest. It was a deep, lasting joy, not the fleeting happiness that comes from things outside, but the calm, confident happiness that comes from knowing she had learned, grown, and helped others. She realized that her life had purpose and direction. The lessons from her journey were not just memories. They were tools she could carry forward. She took out her notebook and wrote the lessons in simple words. Pain teaches. Small steps grow. Face fear. Help others. She smiled as she read them aloud. These were not just words. They were promises she had made to herself. Promises to continue learning, continue growing, and continue sharing her light with the world. She understood that life would still have challenges. Pain would return, fear would appear, and moments of doubt would come. But now, she had learned the key to handling them. She had learned that strength is not the absence of struggle, but the ability to act despite it. She had learned that power starts inside, grows with action, and spreads when shared. Her reflection filled her with hope. She realized that anyone listening could follow the same path. You do not need to be perfect. You do not need to have all the answers. You only need to begin. You only need to take small steps, face your fears, and use your experiences to help others. Pain can become your teacher, courage can become your guide, and your actions can turn darkness into light. She closed her notebook and looked at the sky. The sun was setting, painting the world with warm colors. She felt grateful for her journey, for the lessons, and for the opportunity to share them. She knew that the path ahead was still full of challenges, but she was ready. She had grown, she had learned, and she had found power inside herself. And with that reflection, she prepared to move toward the final stage of her story, a stage where hope, strength, and inspiration would guide her and anyone willing to listen. Conclusion: turning pain into power. Welcome back, dear learners. Maybe you are carrying pain right now. Maybe your heart feels heavy and your mind repeats the words, "I cannot do this." You are not alone. Everyone experiences hardship, sadness, or fear at some point in life. But today, I want to remind you of something very important. Pain is not your enemy. Pain can be your teacher. Pain can be your guide. And pain can become the seed of strength, courage, and love. Think about the girl in our story. She was broken, invisible, and afraid. She felt weak, lost, and small. Life had hurt her, and she thought she could never rise. But she made a choice. She could have stayed in her sadness. She could have let fear and doubt control her forever. Instead, she chose to act. She chose to take small steps. She chose to face her fears. She chose to listen to her inner voice. She chose to help others. And through these choices, her pain became power. Your story can be the same. Pain does not need to break you. It can teach you lessons about courage, resilience, and growth. Each small step you take today, each act of bravery, each kind word you speak, will shape the person you become tomorrow. Even the smallest efforts matter. Even the tiniest seeds grow into strong trees when cared for patiently. Think of yesterday's pain as a shadow. It may feel heavy, dark, and endless. But tomorrow, with every choice you make, that shadow can shrink. Pain can guide you to strength you never knew you had. It can help you discover courage to speak, to try, to love, and to grow. It can teach you empathy for others, wisdom for life, and hope for the future. Just like the girl in our story, you can transform your pain into light. Remember the steps she took: waking early, moving her body, writing down her thoughts, learning new skills. These were simple actions, yet they created big change. Then she faced fear. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of the future. Each time she acted despite fear, it became smaller, and her courage grew. She learned to listen to her inner voice, the one that says, "I can do this," even when the world says, "You cannot." And she shared her journey with others, helping them and transforming her scars into light. The lessons are clear for you too. Pain is real, but it can teach. Small steps create big change. Facing fear builds courage. Helping others gives meaning. And most importantly, the power to transform begins inside you. Your inner voice, your choices, and your actions can guide you toward a stronger, brighter, and more meaningful life. Do not wait for life to be easy. Do not wait for pain to disappear. You cannot control everything that happens, but you can control how you respond. You can choose to shrink in sadness, or you can choose to grow through it. You can let yesterday's pain break you, or you can let it build you into someone stronger. The choice is yours. When you embrace this truth, something wonderful happens. Your pain becomes a teacher. Your struggles become lessons. Your fear becomes courage. Your loneliness becomes connection. And your life becomes a story of transformation. just like hers. You realize that even in darkness, there is a path forward. Even when it seems impossible, there is hope. Even when the world feels heavy, there is light inside you waiting to grow. So, my dear learners, as we finish this story, remember this. Your pain is not your enemy. It is your chance to rise, to learn, to become stronger, to help others, and to create a life full of meaning and purpose. Today can be the first small step toward that change. Tomorrow can be the day you face your fear, and each day after that can build your power, courage, and love. Her story is not only her story, it can be your story too. You can take what she learned and use it for yourself. You can transform your sadness into hope, your struggles into strength, and your pain into power. The girl in our story became strong. You can too. So now, take a deep breath. Listen to your inner voice. Take one small step today, no matter how tiny. Speak kindly to yourself. Face one fear. Reach out to one person. And remember, your pain is the seed. Nurture it with courage, patience, and love. Watch it grow into the power that will guide you through life. You are stronger than you think. Your journey is beginning, and your tomorrow can be full of light.